are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai Corte, and I'm so honored to welcome one of our fierce leaders, learners, and listeners, Dr. Jonathan A. Carroll. He is founder of Jabali Academy, which, by the way, is celebrating its opening school year. The Empowering Minds Gala is taking place next week on July 31st at the Intuit Dome, honoring a number of folks that are no strangers to KBLA, no strangers to our community, folks like Anthony Anderson and Gina Prince Bythewood, Debbie Allen and Norm Nixon, as well as Holly Robinson Pete and Rodney Pete. The mission of Jabali Academy is really around educating students rooted in the African diaspora and partnering with the Inglewood community every step of the way. Dr. Carroll, welcome to A More Perfect Union.
Doc, it's a pleasure. It's good to be in your presence again. It's been a while since that panel we did.
I know it's been a minute, but I'm so glad that you're here. We did a panel for the NAACP a while back, and the work continues. Talk to us about the origin story of Jabali Academy. There's so many folks out there that are just overwhelmed by the headlines that are coming out of everywhere. And what I love so much about the work that you're doing is you've been steadily building, and you've been bringing folks together every step of the way, investing in the minds of our young people. Yes, there are people that are going to attempt to erase our history. People are going to attempt to scuttle opportunities for education for our people and for our community. But what I love so much about what you're doing is you haven't been deterred. You've continued to create a learning environment rooted in the truth of who we are. And so hat tip to you on that, first of all. But tell our leaders, learners, and listeners your origin story.
So yeah, as you mentioned before the break, I am the proud son of educators, and even beyond my parents, education is kind of our family business. I had great aunts who were in education. So as much as I tried to run away from it, being a pre-med student in my early undergrad years, I eventually came home to education, and that led me to wonderful opportunities. You mentioned I was at what I call one of the top destination schools here in LA, Harvard Westlake. And so once I landed there, it was great to be able to pursue that professional opportunity. But I always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to do something that would benefit, communities of color more directly, and Black students in particular. I certainly grew up and witnessed a number of families who feel like they have to make a choice between having a rigorous academic experience that's going to lead them to wonderful college institutions and opportunities, and then having the identity affirmation that we know is important. It's one thing to get a great education, but if you leave that education feeling as if you are a second-class citizen with limited opportunities, then what good is it really? So the origin of Jabali Academy comes from wanting to provide that kind of rigorous application and marry it to a culturally affirming experience, and one that's, as you mentioned, across the diaspora. I think there's so much harm that happens when we have, this rift or this schism between, I guess, what is now termed foundational Black Americans and those, who are more closely rooted to the continent, and separated by only one generation or more. So Jabali Academy is my attempt to pay forward all that's been poured into me as an educator and use that as a community unifying force and a trajectory changing force for young people.
Talk to us about, what are some of the questions that you're getting from students that are a part of Jabali Academy? What are some of the conversations that you're having with faculty that are, trying to navigate, the culture wars? The culture wars that are coming, not just with folks who may share a different political ideology, but for folks that, may consider themselves more a part of the ADOS crowd or other crowds.
Yeah, so to be clear, we're starting our first year this fall. So we're going to be welcoming in a small cohort of kindergarten and first grade students. So thankfully, they won't be bringing too many of those arguments to us right off the bat. But certainly in our open houses in this admission cycle that we just had, you do have the questions about the kinds of things that we're going to be teaching. Why is it important to bring an Afrocentric perspective into the classroom and really center that as part of the educational foundation? Does doing that prevent students from getting kind of the, you know, subject rigor that they're going to need when they go off into the next school, whether it be middle school or high school? And then, ultimately, what does it mean for how we, hold those students accountable and make sure that, their behavior follows the norms that, are asked for in the more traditional educational setting. So those are things that have come up, and again, have been things that I have thought about extensively in the places that I've been as an educator. And one of the main things that we try to drive home is that just because we are bringing to the center the contributions of folks from the diaspora doesn't mean that we're sacrificing anything. And in fact, when you look and study, those earliest civilizations, they had the norms that, many families would consider very important to the way they raise their children now anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and just as you were saying that, I was thinking about uh, a headline that I saw earlier today. I'm not sure if you saw it, but Representative Nancy Mace, uh, the Republican congresswoman representing a district in South Carolina, she actually introduced a resolution today barring the formation of House caucuses organized around race, ethnicity, and national
Mm.
origin. If adopted, this measure would effectively force uh, Democratic aligned groups, including the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, to dissolve. What do you make of that at a time when you are uh, beginning to build a school, break ground, on a learning community, a school that flies in the face of everything that Representative Nancy Mace thinks is wrong, at least in the House of Representatives?
Well, I had heard about this resolution. Oddly enough, I try to stay away from Nancy Mace news when I can. I thought we had kind of seen the end of her with her, Senate bid, but it really just undergirds why I feel it's important for us to have the types of institutions that really are enriching and fortifying students and their families to go into spaces where there may not be the same kind of supports moving forward, or at least for a little while. If you think about, and I hear people often talk about the fact that this is feeling like a revisit of the Reconstruction era. And if you think about the Reconstruction area, that was actually a time when Black communities were really able to gather their resources, scarce as they may have been, and build viable and vibrant ecosystems that allowed for thriving to happen, both economically, politically, and any other realm that you would think of. And so Jabali Academy to me is just a seed and a foundational piece of trying to make sure that we can have that protection in the face of actual cultural violence about against groups and spaces that have been built based upon advocacy because there had been harm, right? The CDC is formed because there wasn't representation and there wasn't advocacy of a certain type, in the government. So you wanted to, you know, bring those, resources together so that you could have a body that could speak as one fist. And if you're not going to have that in Congress, then we certainly need to have those outside of the walls, so that folks can go to the Capitol and continue to be able to advocate.
I mean, I really love again what you're building at the Jabali Academy in Inglewood. I love that you're building this safe space from cultural violence. I mean, that's essentially the heart and soul of what you're doing, and that is important work. That is very necessary work. But I'm just wondering, in this moment where we're seeing such an onslaught
Mhm.
of cultural violence everywhere. We're also seeing folks using technology
Mhm.
dare I say, abusing technology to accelerate the kind of cultural violence that we see taking place. Talk to us about how you and the other leaders of Jabali Academy are thinking about uh, AI. How you're thinking
Mhm.
about approaching AI when it comes to the little ones. How are you thinking about creating a healthier culture around the use of technology, starting when they're young?
I think the biggest piece, especially when they're young, is understanding that AI and technology really can't be. If you think about a life in a pie, AI and technology can't be a majority of that pie. There have to be other realms that help balance you out. And so ultimately, we will have a healthy approach to what AI and technology are because they are a part of our lives. If you are not, up on the technology and really in this economy, you're not up to date on information. Think about how many of us get our news headlines and do research based on a technology versus going to the library and checking out books. So the key for us is to keep everything in a bit of balance and really being able to use AI to help um, understand narratives and be able to develop critiquing skills because I think that's going to continue to be necessary when it comes to how we engage AI, the ability to think critically so that the questions that we are asking of AI, are those that are going to spit, different answers and then being able to analyze to make sure that what comes back to us is accurate. So I can't, allow for students to lose the ability to think uh, in deep ways just because we have this tool now that allows for much quicker access to kind of surface level
Yeah.
information.
Real quick, in about 30 seconds, where can people go to tap in to support the Jabali Academy, to be a part of the community that you're building? And if there are any last minute tickets to your Empowering Minds Gala on July 31st, where can people go?
JabaliAcademy.org has it all. Jabali Academy, all one word, .org. Tickets to the gala, learn about the school, apply to the school, inquire about the school, learn about our enrichment programs because we are community partnered and want to be very much entrenched in the community. And you can learn all about what we're doing.
Our thanks to Dr. Jonathan Carroll. When we come forward, Maurice Mitchell, the national director of the Working Families Party, he joins us as their national convention kicks off right here in Los Angeles tomorrow. Then a little bit later, we'll get into a brand new 2028 poll that's already making noise. You're listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. More when we come forward. Thanks, Dr. Jonathan. You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai, and my next guest has one of the more interesting resumes in progressive politics. A former hardcore punk band frontman turned Ferguson organizer turned national director of the Working Families Party, where he's been building what he calls the political home for a multiracial working class movement since 2018. Please welcome Maurice Mitchell to A More Perfect Union. Welcome, brother.
It's so good to be with you, bro.
It's so great to have you here, to have you on the ground, or at least en route to Los Angeles. We're going to come back to some of what I just said in our next segment, but I just want to get your read on the 2028 field because there's a new poll out today that's turning heads. Well, it starts with Buttigieg and Vance. Apparently, they're leading the pack in this new primary poll, this new Emerson College poll that's out today. It shows Pete Buttigieg leading the Democratic field at 19%, with Gavin Newsom at 17%, John Ossoff and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tied at 13%. On the Republican side, it's basically a coin flip between J.D. Vance at 39% and Marco Rubio at 38%. I know the Working Families Party. You have your convention happening in LA this weekend. There's lots to talk about, but this is certainly got to be in the mix, no?
We've been talking about all types of politics, from local to presidential politics, and we're trying to get through this election, right? There's still a lot of elections to go. Like the Michigan election is heating up, and that's in less than 2 weeks. This is what I'll say, and I think at this point in time, before the 2016 election, Trump was not a serious contender, right? At this point in time, before the 2008 election, I don't think many people saw a path for Barack Obama. And if you looked at the polling at that time, I think you would draw different conclusions, right, about who the front runner actually is. Mm-hmm. So, in presidential politics, the amount of time between now and the actual presidential election is several lifetimes. These polls, I think they're interesting. And I think once the debate starts actually happening and people start actually declaring and building organizations, and then also articulating what their vision is to the American people, I think you're going to see some different numbers. This is polling, before a midterm election with a set of people who haven't even declared before they've actually put their hats in the race formally and actually started a campaign. But what I do know, and this is from going to every corner of this country, that there is generally this sense across race, across region, that the status quo is not working. And I think anybody that wants to become president is going to have to contend with that. How are they going to move past this status quo? And if they're just talking about how bad Trump is on the Democratic Party side, I don't think that that's going to be enough.
I could not agree with you more. And that brings me to the Working Family Party. For a lot of our leaders, learners, and listeners who may not be familiar with the Working Family Party, who might think of it as an alternative to the Democratic Party as we know it, can you set the record straight? What is the Working Family Party, and what is it that you all stand for? Sure. And more importantly, how are you all meeting the moment?
Sure. Well, we are a grassroots independent party. When I say independent, I mean independent from big money and corporations and the interest of, on the local level, the Fraternal Order of Police or the real estate lobby. On the national level, APAC, AI, crypto, big banks, big oil. And we build from the bottom up. We started almost 30 years ago in New York, and now we're in a number of places, including California, where we're holding our California convention. And we just look, what do we believe in? We believe that in a democracy, people should govern, not just the uber wealthy and not corporations and not, think tanks like the Heritage Foundation, but the actual people of this country. And we trust that everyday working people who have to figure out how to make ends meet, who have to figure out how to make $1 out of 15 cents, who have to deal with the challenges of everyday life, they have the expertise in those challenges and the solutions, and they're fit to govern. So we recruit everyday people. Sometimes they're educators, sometimes they're activists or organizers, sometimes they're in all different types of walks of life, and we recruit them on the hyper local level. So I'm talking city council, school board, things of that nature. In California, there's a great story of Randy Vegas, who was a member of WFP. He then became a member rep, which is inside of WFP. In California, you could run for this position. And then he ran for school board in Bakersfield and won. And he is the son of immigrants. He's an educator. He's a small business owner. He supports his family's auto shop. And then he decided to he went to the national convention of the WFP in Philadelphia. He saw Summer Lee speak. He saw Greg Kazar speak, who are in Congress. And he said, you know what? I feel like I could run as well as a next gen working class person of color, because they've done it too. And he put his hat in the race, running in a purple district where David Valadao, a MAGA Republican, currently is governing. This is a working class Latino district. And he ran against both David Valadao and a pretty, I would say, corporate sort of establishment Democrat. And he didn't take any of the corporate money, and he won. And so Californians will have a choice between Randy Vegas and David Valadao, those folks in that district. And to me, that is what we do everywhere. We recruit people who are independents, people, like Attorney General Tish James, for example, she started off as a Working Families Party candidate for New York City Council in Brooklyn. And when the Democrats didn't know what to do with her because she was too independent, the Working Families Party did. We ran her as an independent Working Families Party city council person, and she's rose all the way up to become Attorney General. So rinse and repeat. We do that everywhere in order to build this bulwark of independent politics, because we believe that governing is the prize. It's not just about getting people elected, it's actually governing, because that's where you could actually get things done for working people. And that's one of the reasons why those interests spend so much money in our politics, because they're so afraid of people who aren't on the take, people who aren't compromised by the big money, to be in governing positions, because government still has a lot of power. Like big money has a lot of power, but government makes so many decisions. And if people think government didn't matter and elections didn't matter, then why would so many billionaires and so many corporations be spending so much money on our politics if none of this mattered? It matters deeply. And we'll see what happens, but we still have the ability to go head to head with the corporations and the establishment and win as everyday working people. The WFP is the infrastructure to make that happen. And like I said, we're in California, and we're building out everywhere. We're in more than 20 states. We started in New York, and my phone keeps on ringing because people want a different type of politics, and we're building that political party. We, of course, agree with the Democrats that MAGA and Trump are bad, bad, bad. We agree. And we align with many Democrats in those efforts. So in general elections, many of our people are Democrats because we recruit them into Democratic primaries. And I have no problem saying that, look, from dog catcher up to the highest office, your garden variety Democrat is leaps and bounds better than anybody in the Republican Party on any range of issues. However, that is insufficient. That is insufficient. Simply not being a Republican, that is the status quo politics that got us where we are. And if the status quo worked, then we wouldn't be here. And there's a lot of people who believe let's just fight MAGA. Let's not worry about all of this other stuff. They call it infighting. I just call it common sense to want, in the richest country in the history of the world, for our people to have healthcare, housing, childcare. We should have those things. And that's not controversial, actually. It's very popular. The only place it's controversial is in state houses and in Capitol Hill. And the remedy for that is people who are independent getting into those positions and then governing. So that's what we do.
So I just want to put a finer point on this for folks who might be hearing this for the first time. I'm hearing you say that it just so happens a lot of members of the Working Family Party happen to be Democrats. They don't have to be, but a lot of them happen to be, and they run in Democratic primaries. But there are also folks who may be registered independents that are also a part of the Working Families Party. And this is about really casting a fresh vision for the future. A lot of people out there that I think are starving for a vision that meets the moment. Is it your view that the Working Families Party is on top of that?
Absolutely. People, whenever I talk to folks, they are deeply disturbed by the Republican Party and their fascism. And they're also deeply disturbed by the Democratic Party. And what I've heard time and time again is a lack of fight, a lack of vision, a lack of courage, often corruption, and way too much focus on their donors, way too much focus on who they believe are powerful people in foreign countries, and not enough of focus on working class people here. I hear that again and again. So yes, the Republicans are fascist and racist. I hear that. But the Democrats are status quo. And people want another option. People want something else. We're building that something else.
In terms of, oh, go ahead.
No, and we're doing it in a way that I like to call non-delusional, because sometimes people kind of have this triggered reaction when they hear third party, right? And we're doing the hard work, county by county, city by city, and we have the receipts. So, in California, we recruited and endorsed 70 people in the last election. 60 of them are prevailed, and they'll be in the ballot on California. 60 of the
Whoa.
70 people that we endorsed, right? And I'm really proud of the fact that we endorsed 7 people, 2 incumbents, Latifah Simon and Ro Khanna, and then 5 challengers, and every single one of our congressional endorsements won. All of our folks won, from LA all the way up to Sacramento. That's an incredible winning record when you look at all of the money that was spent against us. And the California WP is like one of our newer chapters. It is now the largest chapter of the WFP. We have thousands of individual members. Those of you who are listening that come to our convention at the Line Hotel in Koreatown will see this. We'll see the dynamism that's happening on the ground. So this is very real. We are, in fact, in Philadelphia, where you can run as an independent WFP person. There aren't Republicans in Philadelphia. There are Democrats. It's a very democratic city. And there are Working Families Party people who serve Philadelphia. So Kendra Brooks and Nicholas O'Rourke, two independent, working class, Black elected officials who come from the struggles of everyday people. They are at-large city council people, so they serve all of Philadelphia, and they're passing legislation that is truly transformative, stopping algorithmic increases in rent. So that's basically using AI in order to artificially increase your rent. Very important during an affordability crisis. Making sure that employers respect their workers, especially domestic workers that tend to be women of color, right? Making sure that people can't get kicked out of their homes and evicted without some mechanism in order to negotiate with their landlord. This was critical during COVID, and they extended it. And this is one of the landmark pieces of legislation that came out of the Working Families Party. So we believe in results. We think that that's a great cycle, right? We recruit people, we get them elected, but we don't start there. They get their hands dirty actually governing for the people. They put some results on the table so people's lives are changed. And then we do it over again and over again. And to me, that's how we govern in a way that pulls our country towards the people and away from the corporate interest. And it's happening all across the country. And for those of you that are fed up with our politics, I'm fed up too. The polls are real because I talk to folks. People are fed up with the party system. People are fed up with the Republicans. People are tired of the Democrats. You know, when Lindsey Graham passed away and, so many Democrats were eulogizing this person who, when you look at his legislative record and you think of the harm that he did and all the warmongering, I don't believe in the halo effect. I think we should, tell the truth and shame the devil. So many people were just so offended by that. They're like, this is the opposition party, right? And at a time when we have masked men marauding our streets with our tax dollars through ICE, killing innocent people, we need a true opposition that is courageous.
When we come forward, I want to pick up on that point. We know that the Reverend Al Sharpton has made a little bit of news related to keeping South Carolina first in the 2028 primary. The DNC hasn't made any final determination yet, but we want to get Maurice's take on that and more. You're listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. Maurice Mitchell of the Working Families Party when we come forward. You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. Mitchell, National Director of the Working Families Party, which has an LA convention happening starting tomorrow. And so pull up to the Line Hotel. Well, you probably wouldn't go to the Working Families Party website and RSVP, but then after you do that, pull up to the Line Hotel. There's a lot to learn. They are really at the tip of the spear, really changing our politics, really offering folks a little bit different, something a little different than what people have grown tired of, quite frankly. And speaking of tired, people are tired of this conversation around which state is going to go first in this Democratic primary calendar. To Maurice's point, we still got to get through 2026, but that's not stopping people from talking about 2028. in our remaining minutes, let me just say that Reverend Al Sharpton's publicly making the case that Democrats to keep South Carolina as the first primary state in 2028, the same state that resurrected Joe Biden's campaign in 2020, largely on the strength of Black voters. This morning, I spoke to a source on the ground in South Carolina, in the room. And there's this debate around, South Carolina versus Nevada. And some people were making it into a Black versus brown situation, big business, versus, organized labor. Does the Working Families Party have a position on the 2028 calendar?
So we do not have a position, and we try not to butt into the Democratic Party's business and their internal affairs, right? We try to, I'm building my own party. They're doing their thing. What I will say is that I think for voters, the earlier they set that calendar, the better, for everybody involved, and also for those that want to impact the policy conversation. The earlier those we know those early states, that allows people to begin to engage in those communities in order to ensure that there's rigorous organizing and conversations happening. So I want it to be said. And I do think it's important that we do consider racial diversity, because we live in a very racially diverse, very ethnically diverse country. And I do think it's important that we hear from diverse perspectives and all manners of diversity, because we know that the early momentum from who wins those early primaries has a long way in kind of sealing who ends up actually being the nominee. And so I do think that that's a critical conversation, and there's a lot of things that do need to be balanced. But whatever they do, I'll tell you what, the Working Families Party will be part of that conversation, right? Because, we have an agenda, the Democrats right now, they're running on backlash against Trump.
That's right.
Backlash is not a strategy. The Working Families Party has the Working Families Guarantee. We have an agenda, and we're going to want to see how those candidates respond to our bold agenda for the country, and whether or not they're willing to invest in universal childcare, universal healthcare, a jobs guarantee, a housing guarantee, 12 weeks of paid family leave.
And more. We are out of time.
Right.
So people can go to the convention at the Line Hotel this weekend here in LA. We've covered a lot of ground: tariffs, trust, faith, justice, education, and the wide open road to 2028. Here's what I want you to take from all of it. Whether it's a nun in handcuffs, a kid with a rare cancer diagnosis, a federal worker fighting for her job, or a community fighting to open a school, the through line today is the same as it's always been on the show. Somebody somewhere is doing the work of showing up for people the system keeps forgetting. But that somebody this week, however small the version of it looks like, that somebody still matters. We're going to leave it there. Our thanks to the entire Village Helps to produce a more perfect union. Our executive producer, Tavis Smiley. Our sound engineer, brother Andy. Our show producers, Faraji and Art. And of course, Mr. Maurice Mitchell, National Director of the Working Families Party. Thank you for joining us. Remember, don't panic, organize, do what you can from where you are with what you have, but by all means, do something. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai. See y'all later.